So instead of looking at the whole person who suffers from a very complex illness, a cancer doctor immediately thinks about the cancer cell, which is not the problem. The cancer cell is not the problem. Let us get back to that later. The problem is that this cancer cell lives in an organism and the organism doesn't stop it from growing.
All right. Dr. Henning Saupe, welcome to the show.
Hello, Mats, and hello, Jacob. It's a pleasure to meet you and your audience today. I'm excited to have this interview with you.
Likewise, Dr. Henning. Okay, so Henning, last year in November, you visited Denmark, where I got to meet you for the first time. You were speaking about primarily your upcoming book, Holistic Cancer Medicine. And it was amazing. It was an eye-opener for me to get to know you. And I think especially what struck me the most was your holistic approach, which is very unconventional here in the Western world. But also the fact that many of your ideas, or actually most of your ideas, were so similar to my own my own research about longevity and the human body and disease prevention and whatever I do. So I was just amazed by you, and I bought your book right away, and I have read it since then, and it's amazing. So apart from being a German doctor and an author, then Henning, who are you?
Who am I? Well, I'm this guy who has been asking himself and the world, what is life about, since I can remember that I'm thinking thoughts. So from the time of being a student at grammar school, I was interested in life sciences and in every scientific approach that could give me an answer on why are the things the way they are and what keeps the world together. So really the big questions. And I have never stopped asking these questions, and our conversation today is maybe a little glimpse of what I found out the last 40, 50 years. And the more I study the complexity of life, the more I understand that everything is connected with everything else. And that is the definition of a holistic worldview, holism. It's a philosophical approach that tells us that things are connected rather than separate. You don't understand a part of the world without its context. That's the holistic approach. And it does not make sense to only look at a fraction of the reality and try to understand this fraction of the reality without its context. So long story short, I decided to study medicine at the age of 19, eventually 20. I got into med school in my home country in Germany, in southern Germany, in a city called Ulm. Nice city on the river Danube with a modern university. And I studied medicine like 30,000 students did this year together with me in Germany. There are more than 40 medical universities in Germany. So I was one of these 30,000 that started studying medicine in 1986. And I was thrilled by all the details that I was taught about, and I was given really billions of details, names of muscles and vessels and details in anatomy and biochemistry and physics and biophysics and everything that medicine uses in order to make diseases manageable and to find ways to help people who have health issues. But my question, what drives life? What is behind the phenomenon of a living organism? What does a living organism need in order to stay healthy? Was never addressed. Believe it or not, I studied almost 7 years at Ulm University and passed all the exams and got out of medical school with a medical degree and a doctorate in medicine. But these simple questions were never addressed and never discussed and never asked. And that was quite surprising and a little frustrating. So what I did parallel to my medical studies at Ulm University, And by the way, it would have been the same in Copenhagen or in Odense or in Berlin.
Yeah.
There is
Definitely
a difference. It's the Western world approach that is very uniform in all the Western world countries. What I did parallel to my regular medical studies is I looked for seminars on naturopathic medicine, on homeopathy, on spiritual development, on meditation, on yoga, on all kinds of sciences and life sciences and practical approaches to work with health and life that did not find a place at the university. So I learned more and more that the approach that I was exposed to, or the way I was trained to become a medical doctor eventually, had some very clear characteristics. And I did not know that while I studied medicine, but it became more and more clear in the years that followed, that what they told us at the university was a reductionistic way of looking at life and disease and the treatment of diseases, rather than a holistic one. And I can explain what that means. And it was also a totally materialistic way of teaching medicine and finding ways to help other people suffering from illnesses, because spirit, or not even the concept of energy, actually existed. Still does not exist, I would say, in a normal training program for a medical doctor. And so, what did I say? Reductionistic instead of holistic, materialistic instead of spiritual, and monistic. Dualistic instead of monistic. Those are the three characteristics. Dualistic means maybe there is something like culture and music and art and love and spirituality, but that has nothing to do with medicine. Let's stay with the facts and let's pray on Sundays and let's make love with the beloved ones in the evening time. But during the work time as a medical doctor, we don't speak about love and spirituality. So I would like to characterize the philosophy behind the training, my university training that I got, as dualistic. So spirit and matter is separate from each other. It's reductionistic. It looks at a tiny little fraction of reality. We can find examples quite very soon when we talk about cancer, maybe my book. So instead of looking at the whole person who suffers from a very complex illness, a cancer doctor immediately thinks about a cancer cell, which is not the problem. The cancer cell is not the problem. Let's get back to that later. The problem is that this cancer cell lives in an organism and the organism doesn't stop it from growing. So a reductionistic approach, and then a materialistic, that means medicine is still on the level of Newtonian physics and has not entered the era of quantum physics, which we started 100 years ago. Niels Bohr, one of the genius physicists and most famous scientists from your country, from Denmark, showed the world that the true nature of matter is actually spirit. And his friend Max Planck in Germany said the same. There is a quotation from a lecture of the aged Max Planck, who was a Nobel Prize winner and one of the fathers of quantum physics, where he says in the lecture that I studied the nature of matter throughout my entire life, and to find out that the true core of matter is spirit. That's quite a stunning statement at the end of a long life as a physicist. So holistic medicine, or the holistic approach to the reality and to life and diseases, means it's monistic. It's only one world. Spirit and matter coexist in the same world. It's not separate universes. A reductionistic approach does not tell us the truth. It is likely to tell us a lie, that this tiny little thing is the problem, and we forget the context. And then spirituality, that there is more than atoms and remedies. If we come eventually to my life theme, treating patients with cancerous diseases, the cancerous drama takes place in a spiritual being, in a human being who has feelings and thoughts and virtues and So it's not only a physical phenomenon. So it's spiritual and somatic at the same time. It's one world, and we need to look at the context in order to understand the problem. And that was not what I learned at med school. Where did I learn that? I learned that outside the medical university on many seminars, and I found my teachers that helped me to understand these things that I summarized now the last 3 minutes.
Interesting.
We'll take a quick break to acknowledge one of our sponsors, Nordic Kings. I've been taking Nordic Kings products for more than 2 years now in everything from their bone marrow to their beef liver pills. And this is to spike my micronutrient profile without having to take any synthetic multivitamin pills, because I don't like the taste of organs. So this solution provides me with the exact same nutrients that I can get from the organs without having to eat them. And they're of course made from the highest quality, organic, grass-fed and free-range cows. And this is exactly why I've chosen to partner up with Nordic Kings for so many years now, because I prefer quality over quantity and always nature first. You can save 15% off your next order by heading over to nordickings.se/en and use the code HOLISTIC15.
I think if it's possible, maybe we should break down what is cancer to the people listening, just because I think to many people, some people see it as some sort of mold or something that takes over the host, or, people don't really know what it is. Maybe you can explain to them what is it?
Yeah. Okay. For the first, it's one of the most important diseases that we need to get control over if we don't want to die too early. A few words from cancer statistics. It's a disease that today 1 in 3 adults will develop and suffer from in Western world countries. And the trend goes up every year with about 2 to 3%, so that the dark prognosis of 2040, and that's only how many years, 17, 16 years until 2040 is, that the statistics tell us that we're likely to have 50% cancer rate in adults in developed countries in only 16, 17 years. So this is why I wrote this book, and this is why we're having this podcast today, because we need to learn what causes cancer and what we can do to reverse it, or to lower the risk that we end up getting cancer altogether. So what is this? This is the first thing. It's a very common disease. And the word cancer summarizes approximately 500 different types of diseases. And the common characteristic of all these 500 cancerous diseases is that there is a growth of tissue somewhere in the body. It starts in an organ, and we call it breast cancer if this process starts in the milk gland in the breast, or we call it prostate cancer if it starts in the male prostate, or in the stomach, then we call it stomach cancer. And what does that mean? That means that the part of this organ starts to grow, and not only in a way to repair what has been damaged, that would be normal scar tissue growth or repair growth, but this growth is totally out of order, and the cells that grow have very special characteristics. That number one, it does not serve the function of the body. The cells represent a very immature, baby-like, embryo-like form of cellular behavior, and it does not only grow, but it grows and it spreads cells to the rest of the body, where all of a sudden this unwanted and uncontrolled growth takes over in different parts of the body, and that's what we call daughter tumors, or in Latin, metastases. So cancer is a disease where tissues growth out of control, and not only in one spot, it's where it starts, but from there it spreads immature cells that lodge in other organs, in the liver, in the lungs, in the bones, in the lymph nodes, and continue to grow without contributing to anything good in the body. And eventually the body is exposed to growing tissues, and eventually that causes a lot of problems. And if you don't stop it, it causes the death of the entire organism by blocking the natural organ function. So it's again, summary, cancer describes a big family of diseases where the common characteristic is uncontrolled growth of an organ that then spreads its cells to other organs and invades the entire body. And if you don't block it, the body dies from it. That's cancer. And of course, now we have more detailed answers. That's why I wrote the book. Mm-hmm. I needed 350 pages to explain more in detail what cancer is. But this is the first phenomenon. You see something growing, and it's an immature cell form behind this growth, and it spreads its cells into the rest of the body, and eventually the body drowns your cells.
But I believe at the conference last year that you said something about cancer is growing in all of us. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. So that's the next step. We'll answer your question. I mean, the answer is the question, yeah, and it will probably take an hour to answer the different layers of the answer. So yes, there is another layer, and that is that cancer represents a life form where a very old program of metabolism, of winning energy, of making energy out of the food the cell gets and the oxygen the cell gets is activated. And this happens that cells go into this alternative life mode or metabolic mode. This happens all the time, a tiny little bit. So I hope that we three who do this podcast today are free of cancer. I don't know details about your health, but I hope and I assume that we're not aware, that any of us is aware of having cancer as a disease. But if we would check our bodies today, we would find some cancer cells, even in healthy individuals. And the number you find in the literature is some thousand, some hundred, some scientists say up to some thousand cells is what our body produces in cancer cells every day. Mm-hmm. Is that a lot or is that little? Well, it seems to be very, very little. The number of cells that make up my body and every human body is around 100 trillions. 10 by the power of 12. That's a big number.
Large number.
And these 10 by the power of 12 cells, they repair themselves and they regenerate all the time. There are only very few tissues in our body that do not regenerate. The enamel in our teeth and the lens inside in our eye is what does not regenerate. The rest keeps on changing and regenerating as long as we live. Some cells live 4 or 5 days, like white blood cells. Some cells live a month or two, like skeleton cells or the osteoblasts in the cells, in the bones. But the whole body keep on changing its shape, and we're shiveling matter throughout our body, and we keep the shape. That's a super fascinating phenomenon. Yeah, how do we do that? If you see me again in a year's time, there's not one molecule left of the molecules that make my physical body today.
Yeah, it's insane.
But I probably look pretty much the same if I'm lucky. Yeah. So, but all the molecules that you see right now will not be there any longer. Yeah, all the carbon atoms and the oxygen and the sulfur and the phosphorus will all be exchanged. So my body keeps on exchanging matter all the time as long as I live. And a part of this regeneration of my body comes with a number of damaged cells that get a damage on the way to separate and to regenerate. And they end up with a genetic damage, and this genetic damage causes a change in their behavior, and this change of behavior is what we call cancer. And this is the background noise, so to speak, in every one of us, that we constantly produce a few hundred up to a few thousand cancer cells every day. And what happens with these cells? Well, they die in my organism as long as my organism is strong enough to defeat these unwanted and immature cells, mostly because of my immune system, but also because of healthy conditions in my body that do not allow these cells to survive. So it's from two sides. It's the whole biochemical terrain, as we call it, and we will describe that a little closer in a few minutes. and it's the control of my immune system. What is my immune system? Well, it's a self-repair program in my body based on very special cells in my blood. I call them white blood cells, but there are also immune cells in my brain, in my liver, in my kidneys. They have all fancy names that I don't want to pronounce now. They have special names. Von Kupfer Stern cells, for instance, in the liver, to drop a name, is the immune system in our liver. And immune cells, they constantly look through our body if there are cells that do not belong to our body. Yeah. And if this healthy immune system finds a cancer cell that happened to come into existence because of a genetic failure in the process of dividing one cell into two, then these immune cells are aware of this unhealthy cell, of the cell that represents a cancer cell, and eliminate it, eat it up, literally. We have cells in our white blood system that are called big eaters in Greek, macrophages. And so we have billions of macrophages in our blood, and these macrophages, as long as our body is healthy, can detect and destroy cancer cells. So the take-home message from this part of the interview is we all produce a few cancer cells, and that's normal. That's still within what we call healthy, as long as we have enough macrophages to take care of these aberrant cells at a very, very early stage. And as long as we have enough oxygen in our tissues and the right balance between acidity and alkalinity, as long as we have enough nutrients, enough nutrients and minerals, we can keep this balance between a few cancer cells and a powerful self-repair system alive. And if that is the case, then the next question is, what has happened is if somebody develops the disease. So we have a few cancer cells on board, and we produce every day a few cancer cells, but our immune system kills them every day, so we're not having the disease. If somebody comes with a cancerous lump of some centimeters that causes pain and maybe it starts bleeding, the question is, what has happened in this organism so that the organism does not control, or has not controlled, probably for the last 3, maybe already 4 or 5 years, a process that started in one organ, let's say the breast. It's the most common type of cancer nowadays, breast cancer. Second most common is prostate cancer. And that is the question that leads you, or that you get answer to in my book. What are the factors that change the self-control and self-repair mechanisms of the human body? And this is an expression of life, of vitality, the capability to self-regulate and to self-repair. That is what has kept us alive as long as we have been on this earth. From the first day of birth to right now in this very moment, I live because I have a self-regulation capacity, a self-regulation, self-healing capacity. And that is for me the first hint of what I call life force, or the mystery of life. How do I do it? That's a very, very very important question. How do I keep my body alive? And again, linked to the introduction, that is what nobody answered at med school in my training as a medical doctor. And if I ask young students, do you discuss this very important question, what keeps a healthy body alive? It's still not in the program of medical universities. Although it has become a part of the scientific world, but don't ask me why, but it's still not taught at med schools. The academic word for this discipline would be salutogenesis. Salus in Latin is health, and genesis is how to make it. So we should spend more time and more research money in our universities for salutogenesis research. The question, what keeps a healthy body alive? Yeah. And there are some scientists that explore this terrain, but still it's so little in proportion to all the rest the medical student has to learn by heart in order to get the degree. So now I will give you some practical examples what that means.
I just have one question.
A practical example for a salutogenesis question is, what food do we need to eat to stay healthy? How do we need to get the toxins out of our body in order to stay healthy? How do we get enough oxygen into our body? Because everybody knows oxygen is essential for us. We cannot live without it, and so on. All these questions, what do we need in order to stay healthy, deserve more attention. And my book is the answer that I found. It summarizes many hundred books and articles that I've read in my life and makes it understandable for a reader who's just interested. You don't need to be a medical doctor or a biologist or a scientist to understand my book. Everybody can understand it, and I explain all the special terms in plain English or German or the language that the book is printed. It's now available in 3 languages, in Dutch, in English, and in German. And I would love to see a Danish translation at one point in time.
That sounds good.
We'll take a quick break to acknowledge one of our sponsors, Functional Self. Functional Self isn't just another health store. It's a lifestyle. I've been taking many of their supplements for years now, including the MagTech Magnesium, which contains 3 of the most essential magnesium types there is, and this makes me sleep like a rock. To the Rosita cod liver oil, the king of fish oils, which is a rare, unprocessed fish oil naturally high in vitamin D and A. And this is actually one of my favorite products. I've been using it for many years now, and I'm even giving it to my 2-year-old daughter. Functional Self offer a carefully curated range of biohacking tools, supplements, and functional foods that are scientifically proven to restore optimal health. So if you're serious about taking your health to the next level, check out the full range at functionalself.com and save 10% off your first order by using the code HOLISTIC10.
I just have one question, because just to get it clearly, the conventional or the traditional way of curing cancer, now it seems so obvious when you explain it, to us. Something goes wrong in the cell and it starts acting weird, and it seems like, well, you just have to create the environment within your body to, create a good living environment, and then it will not happen. Well, what do we do then? If I come in and I say I might have cancer, and we realize I have cancer, what would the hospital or the doctor prescribe to me, or what would they do?
From a Western...
Yeah, from now, like right now, a status quo, what would be done?
Okay, very good question. Yeah, so the approach, if I just followed what my academic teachers have told me, and if I would be an oncologist at the regional hospital or in Copenhagen or wherever, I would do the following approach. I would exactly measure the size of the tumor with CT scanners or magnetic resonance scanners and find out where in your body is cancer. And then there are guidelines that represent the current understanding and the current approach of the disease and the best treatments following the reductionistic materialistic approach, surgery, chemotherapy to kill as many cancer cells as possible, radiotherapy if necessary, anti-hormonal therapy to block hormones that eventually could speed up the growth of cancer. So if you block it, cancer grows more slowly. And a bunch of about 100 new drugs that are summarized under the headline of immunotherapy. And I find the headline a little misleading, because if you as a layman hear the word immunotherapy, you probably mean that understand that this is good for my immune system, right? But under the headline of immunotherapy in a modern oncology clinic, you find, again, blockers that block something in the metabolism of a cancer cell, but not only in cancer cells. That's why they have side effects. And all these therapies together focus only on the symptom. And that's, again, the reductionistic approach. So we cut the tumor out. That's okay, because the tumor disturbs us and it can spread metastases to the rest of the body. So yes, the surgeon wants to cut it out. But we have understood already 70, 80 years ago that cutting out the main tumor is only one part of the problem, because when there are metastases, the metastases are in most cases more dangerous than the mother tumor. So most cancer patients die, if they die from cancer, not from the primary tumor, but from the metastases. And it's a fact that the surgeons cannot cut out more than what is possible. Sometimes the metastases are so many, so the surgeon cannot cut out all the metastases. And then the next approach is, let's kill cancer. Let's try to kill these disturbing cells. But that is not that easy.
No.
There are some cancerous diseases that respond better to chemotherapy. Those are the blood-based cancer diseases like leukemia. That's where chemotherapy comes from. First chemotherapy that was given was in 1947 in Boston for a child with leukemia. And it was kind of successful. And then it became more and more successful after some years of refined combination of chemotherapy with patients suffering from leukemia. Then one tried the same approach to use toxic drugs to kill cancer cells for other types of cancer, but the results were never as good as they are for leukemia. They are still quite good for leukemia. Many patients can be cured with chemotherapy if they suffer from leukemia. Not all of them, but roughly 50%.
And why is that?
In the treatment of solid organ cancers that are much more common than leukemia, as I said, breast cancer, the number one, and prostate cancer, but also lung cancer and colon cancer are quite common diseases nowadays. And chemotherapy cannot cure it. It's a known fact. It's not only my private notion. It's a fact that chemotherapy has not the potential to cure these diseases. What it can do is to reduce the number of cancer cells for a period of time, but it will never reduce the number down to zero. Why? Because that would be too toxic. The dosage of chemotherapy that you would need to kill all existing cancer cells in a human body would be a deadly dosage of chemotherapy. The patient would not survive it. So oncologists know that and use chemotherapy to reduce the symptoms, to reduce the cancerous masses. And then two things happen. Number one, there will always be some cells that survive the chemotherapy procedure. It's also based on biological laws. They are in the moment when the chemotherapy is given in a dormant phase, and in a dormant phase, they pick up very little of the drug, so they survive the procedure. Only the cells that are metabolically active in the very moment you give the chemotherapy get as much chemotherapy so that they die from it. So the surviving cells become more and more resistant, and the body, the immune system, but also the entire self-regulation system becomes weaker and weaker and weaker the longer the patient is treated with chemotherapy. So somebody calculated out the impact of chemotherapy on the 5-year survival rate of patients with metastasized cancer. It's a study from Australia, from a big hospital, Prince of Wales Hospital in Sydney, Australia. And the sad number was the impact of chemotherapy to the 5-year survival rate of patients with metastasized breast, lung, colon, and prostate cancer was 2.3%. 2.3%.
That's nothing.
That's not a good number.
Yeah.
For some diseases, the survival gain from chemotherapy is in the few weeks or months. Pancreatic cancer, gallbladder cancer, for instance, does hardly respond to chemotherapy at all, and still it's given. Let me characterize where I find the problem and the mistake. The problem is that all these therapies are reductionistic. They look at the cancer cell. They don't ask what has happened so the organism allows this cancer cell to grow. What has happened between the time where the organism was able to control cancer growth, because everybody knows today that everybody grows a few hundred cancer cells. What happened the first, let's say somebody develops cancer at the age of 55. What has happened the first 50 years in this organism that did not develop cancer, and what caused the change from controlling cancer cells to not controlling them? And that question explains the terrain, and that's one of the main topics of my book. Let's understand the terrain around the cancer cell and change the terrain parallel to the strategy to make the cancer smaller. I do not oppose to the important concept of cutting out the tumors as long as that is possible and reducing its size. But I have a problem with therapies, or my patients have problems with therapies that reduce the size of the tumor by 20 to 30% for 3 or 4 months, while the quality of life goes down significantly, and while the chemotherapy ruins the patient's immune system. So what is the consequence of that? Tumor starts to grow again, and the next time chemotherapy works less effectively because the body is already damaged and the tumor cells have metastasized and adapted and mutated. And then the story goes as it is published in numerous medical journals, that let's say the survival rate in average for metastasized ovarian cancer is 3 years, full stop, period. It has not changed for 20 years. That's with a patient with metastasized ovarian cancer has an average prognosis of round about 3 years if she follows the main program of her hospital doctors. And that's a very sad number. And all the new drugs have hardly changed the prognosis and the survival rate. If a new drug is able to prove that the survival rate is better by 2 or 3 weeks, the drug is accepted, the insurances are ready to pay 100 or 200,000 euros for this new therapy, and the one who has conducted the study is invited to a world conference to give a lecture about this new drug. And that is a very, very strange situation that we need to change.
For sure. And from what I can hear on you, and what I totally agree on as well, is that you cannot, or you will have a very hard time curing cancer in a dysfunctional system. You have to find out the root cause of the dysfunction, like with any other disease. And I think that's the whole issue with Western medicine, that we're not taught how to find the root cause. We're not taught how to make people functional. We don't give a shit about how functional people are. We try to, it's just this endless cycle. And that's what I loved about your book so much, that you have these, you had these principles. I think you called them the 12 vital fields of healthy cells, right? Where you kind of summed up the components that made up the functional human being. So maybe we should take them one by one, the 12 principles, and talk about those.
Yeah, and let's also talk about both how you create balance, both the cure and also the problem in these different things. I think it's good to start with the problem that many people are experiencing, and I think we should just start from the beginning. Really.
Yeah. Let me just start by summing.
And I would. Before we go into these 12 fields, I have to tell our audience that a very important message from my book and now in this interview is that once the tumor has grown to a size of 3-4 centimeters, and that's the average size of a tumor that produces symptoms, so the patient eventually goes and sees a doctor and tells the doctor, I believe something is wrong in my breast, or something is wrong in my guts or my prostate. And at that point in time, the tumor has grown already to a big size. And I want to say very, very clearly and openly to our audience, in most cases, patients that have reached this stage of the disease, of a tumor with some centimeters in diameter or bigger, there is no way to cure the disease with only naturopathic remedies. At least I don't know of.
That's important.
A therapy program that is powerful enough to turn this disease around completely and provide a cure. So that is why I always integrate a surgical aspect of the treatment. Sometimes I send patients to radiotherapy, and I do that as a naturopathic, holistic, spiritual doctor because I have learned the hard way that it is necessary.
Okay.
So this wonderful self-healing system has obviously failed for a longer period of time, probably years, to allow the tumor to grow to some centimeters. And when you have a tumor inside your body of many centimeters diameter, this process is to a certain extent dissociated from the harmony of your body. And it's very difficult to shrink a many centimeter large tumor just out of your immune system. That is very difficult. Maybe it's possible in theory, but in practice, I've almost never seen it. So the message is, reduce the tumor, for instance, with a surgical intervention, with an operation, as much as possible, or take it out, and then use the knowledge of the 12 vital fields that we talk about right now to make sure it does not come back, or to reduce the risk that it has spread to other organs and that you develop metastases. So there are 100 reasons why the holistic complementary approach is very, very important. But I have also to say very clearly that it is not always full spectrum alternative to all kinds of hospital treatments. I have come into a position where I have to recommend many more and more patients to see a surgeon to cut out the tumor at a time where the disease is still curable, and not wait until it has metastasized.
For sure. Okay, we get that.
And to reverse, we also have to acknowledge that all the details that have contributed to the weakening of the body, that eventually allows cancer cells to grow and form a lump, may have caused it. But if you then eliminate the cause, the tumor is still there.
Yeah.
So you cannot always expect that by removing the causes, the tumor disappears.
Big at that point. If it's 3 centimeters.
Well, if you remove the causes, the tumor maybe grows more slowly, but it's still there.
Yeah. And that's what Western medicine is brilliant about, right? That's why we need it.
Exactly.
That's for life-saving instances.
Yeah, like surgical stuff and things.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah, for emergency situations, and cancer in an advanced stage is very close to an emergency. Emergency might not always mean that you die tomorrow, but well, if I see somebody with a large tumor that is close to a big vessel, or close to the guts, or close to the pancreatic gland where life-important hormones are produced, then it's
urgent.
It's close to an emergency. And then you don't have the time to wait until turmeric and mistletoe and vitamin C turns around your immune system and empowers your immune system. You just don't have the time. And I give my patients all kinds of examples to understand that. They ask me from morning to evening, I want to heal naturally. And then they come with a large tumor as big as a fist. I say, you can't do that. I don't know how to do that. I can help you to regain your health after a successful surgical operation, but the chances that your body takes away a tumor as big as your fist is close to zero. So you can empty a glass of water with a teaspoon. That is possible. You can, if the tool is a teaspoon, you can maybe empty a bucket of water if you have enough time and empty it. But if I tell you, please empty the Baltic with a teaspoon, it's not going to work. It's just too much water. It's too big. So a tumor of a certain size is just too big for our immune system to eliminate completely. So yes, we need surgeons, and then we need a holistic doctor to help the organism to not produce the same misery one more time, to not allow cancer cells that are still in the body after a surgical operation to grow a new tumor. That's where our power lies. Prevention and secondary prevention, that means after a surgical removal, prevention that it does not come back. Or in a situation where it's chronic cancer, there are many metastases. Let's say breast cancer goes into the skeleton or into the liver, and no surgeon can help the patient any longer. Then we have 100 tools to help the body to be strong, to keep cancer under control. That is also a good example for
sure. Some of these tools are these 12 vital fields of healthy cells. So let's try to walk through them. I will mention all of them now, and we will start from the top afterwards. So your principle number 1 is effective inflammatory control. Number 2, effective detoxification. Number 3, nutritional abundance. 4, abundance of fresh water. 5, sufficient oxygen saturation. 6, proper gut microbiome. 7, effective stress management. 8, low blood sugar. 9, smart immune system. 10, powerful mitochondrial function. 11, alkalinity, acidity, and balance, and 12, infection defense. So the number one, what do you mean by effective inflammatory control? What would these principles sound like?
Yeah. Okay, we all have a system on board in our body that's called inflammation. And inflammation is a self-repair program, a very smart, very complex self-repair program. So thank you, God, that I got a beautiful self-repair program called inflammation. And sometimes inflammation is a pain in the neck because it's too much of it, and then I get symptoms and suffer from too much of inflammation. And that's the problem of our time. Inflammation was identified as one of the main causes of all the chronic diseases that we suffer from today. How is that possible? Something that has helped our species to survive for hundreds of thousands of years has now become our big problem. There's a very good book written about it by a dear friend of mine and colleague, a medical doctor in the United States, Isaac Elias, and he calls it the survival paradox. Again, the immune system is our self-defense system, and it works through inflammation. If something enters my body, a piece of dirt, a dirty piece of wood, or an infection with bacteria or fungi or viruses, my immune system produces inflammation. What does that mean? Well, the part of the body that is exposed to these foreign cells, to the bacteria or the toxins, swells up. So my body dilutes this toxic area with body liquids. That's good. Yeah. The solution of pollution is dilution. If something is intoxicated, I need to wash the toxins away with water. That's the principle of dilution. So my body sends liquid to this part. It swells up. My body signalizes me, hey, something is wrong in this part of your body. Don't use it. It's under repair. And that signal is called pain. And then it turns red. That means a lot of blood cells go there, because with my blood, I send my white blood cells there, my macrophages, to eat up the damaged cells and the invaders, bacteria. And all this together is called inflammation, a great program of self-defense.
Isn't inflammation just a natural part of life? Or has it become something more serious?
Yes, it's an essential part of life. And if we would not be able to react with inflammation, we would have died a long time ago from the first virus infection. And we get virus infections every year, many. So what is the problem with inflammation? The problem is that the same process is activated in individuals in Western world countries, in modern societies, far too often. And inflammatory signals come to our body far too often, and I will soon tell you what these inflammatory signals are. And they switch on my immune system and tell my immune system, fight for your life, something is wrong in your body. But my immune system is not able to solve the problem and turn it around and switch off the signals. So what signals stimulate my body to react with inflammation in a way where inflammation doesn't help me? Stress is the number one. Toxicity is the number two. Lack of anti-inflammatory food items, number three, together with food that is pro-inflammatorily. So, long story short, there's a in-depth chapter in my book about it. So I try to summarize it. Modern life in Denmark, in Germany, in the United States, in Western world countries is a life, or comes with a lifestyle that switches on inflammatory signals all the time. The older we grow, the more we are inflamed. Why do elder people have joint aches? It's a sign of inflammation. Why do elder people grow fat, obese? It's inflammation. Why do elder people grow plaques in their blood vessels and eventually suffer from stroke and heart attack? Because of inflammation. All these chronic long-term diseases, diabetes, inflammation, obesity, overweight, inflammation. Believe it or not, depression has an inflammatory aspect. So somebody who is in a depressed state of mind has too much inflammation in its brain. So interestingly and strangely and tragically enough, inflammation that we just said that belongs to normal life. It saves our life every time we are infected. Thanks to the capacity of being inflamed or producing inflammation, we survive. But now we realize signals from bad food, sleeplessness, depression, stress, chemicals, inflammatory food items like pork, like refined fat, or hardened fat, not refined fat, hardened fat, and the lack of omega-3 fatty acids. All these lifestyle aspects switch on my body's immune system in an unproductive and unhealthy way, and I'm having more and more inflammation without a clear target. My immune system goes crazy and produces inflammation, but there is no clear target. My immune system cannot change my diet. I eat the wrong diet. I eat pork every day and sugar, and with this food I get chemicals in my body that switch on my immune system. My immune system goes crazy, but my immune system cannot change the amount of bad food in my body, so it totally runs into the wrong direction.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And after years and years of chronic inflammation, tissues that are exposed to chronic inflammation turn into a cancer tissue. That's one of the most common ways to, and the most basic ways to describe why cells go into a cancer mode, because they have been stressed, biochemically, physically stressed through inflammation for a long period of time. Scientists like Otto Warburg, 40, 50 years ago, a Nobel Prize winner, said, if you expose a tissue to inflammation and lack of oxygen, which is another cause of or a result of inflammation, that the oxygen level goes down, it sooner or later turns into cancer. So that alone is a good description of what cancer is. It's the reaction of a cell to long-term inflammation and oxygen deprivation. So lack of oxygen and chronically inflamed causes cancer.
Okay.
And that is our lifestyle. So now we can go to the next and the next and the next. And I can already at this point of our podcast tell our audience that these 12 factors that Mats just read up from my book, they are interconnected
so you can
with each other.
Yeah. Dots and arrows in between.
They make a vicious spiral.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. Detoxification. How do we detox properly?
Yeah, good question. So, fact is that we produce toxins every day in our body. It's also part of the natural cycle of life. We put food into our mouth. Some of the food represents energy or represents something that we can turn into energy, but then there is an amount of waste products left that we have to excrete. We do that every day. We pee out uric acid and protein-based products, and we have bowel movements that detox what we don't need from our digestion, and that also contains the detoxed chemicals that our liver detoxifies and excretes in form of bile, this dark brown liquid that stains our stool. So, and we sweat out waste products through our sweat pores. And every minute, like 7-8 times, we exhale. And what do we exhale? We exhale a toxic gas called carbon dioxide that comes from all of our cells, from the turnover of food into energy. We produce carbon dioxide in every cell. We exhale it. So by that, I have defined the 4 detox pathways: breath, sweat, urine, and stool. And now we can ask ourselves, how can we keep this detoxification system going? Well, we have to make sure we have good bowel movements. Once or twice a day is normal. Many people are constipated and don't get the garbage out. And if you have diarrhea, you have an infection or an inflammation in your gut system, and you need to clean up the infection or the inflammation. So a good and regular bowel movement with firm stool is necessary for good health. We need to excrete the water-soluble toxins through the kidneys and the urine system, and we need to drink adequate amounts of water, approximately 40 milliliters per kilogram body weight a day. And for guys like us, that would be around 2.5 liters of pure water. That's what everybody is
cheers.
recommended to drink, as I do right now. And water, please, filtered water in good quality. And please don't drink sodas, Fanta, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, all these
toxins.
Lemonade is far too sweet, doesn't give us the water we need, and it's full of chemicals and colors and most of all sugar. So avoid soda pops and avoid pure fruit juices too as a beverage. A fruit juice is actually not a beverage; it's more like a nutrient, and it doesn't give you the water you need to make your biochemistry healthy. So we all need around 2 to 2.5 liters water. Of course, it depends on the room temperature and climate, but approximately 2.5 liters a day.
But isn't detoxification also avoiding the toxins into our bodies? This can both be through the mouth, but also through the skin, because that's the most present toxification pathway today with all the shit we put on our bodies. So just avoiding that process from occurring.
I totally agree. I listened to a lecture that another friend of mine, a gynecologist in Munich, gave on a complementary cancer conference in summer of this year, and the topic of his lecture was cosmetic products and tattoos as metabolical disruptors. So all these things that we put on our body, the cosmetics, the perfumes, the ointments, contain hundreds of chemicals that are foreign to our body. And now we have to find out the level of tolerance of our body, and what we have to avoid and what we should avoid and what we can tolerate. And the number of chemicals just get more and more and more, and the exposure gets more and more. And the let me say a word. I don't want to be I don't want to cause too many troubles for the young generation that loves tattoos, but as a medical doctor, I'm really worried about the explosion of the tattoo culture of young adults. The numbers are in Germany about 35% of adults between 20 and 30 are tattooed, and the size of the tattoos gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And in this lecture, I learned that already to 3 months after getting a tattoo, up to 30-40% of the pigments are not in the skin any longer, but in the lymph nodes. And what do metals do in the lymph nodes? Well, they change the way lymphocytes, white blood cells behave, etc., etc., etc. So, yes.
Okay.
That was because you asked me how about through the skin.
Sure. It's a potential issue.
So I don't want to frighten those who have chosen to get a tattoo, but if it's your beloved tattoo, then leave it like that, and be aware of the risk that comes with more and more chemicals that you inject into your skin.
Then if you have a tattoo, should you get it removed?
And then, cosmetics, be aware of that. And the what we put into our mouth with the pesticides and the waste products, it's a big topic. And I see already now that we will never make it through all these 12 vital field factors, not even if we would have a 3 or 4 hour long podcast today. So if we go into the details, it becomes...
Yeah, we will just jump over the most important components so we can cover them thoroughly.
Yeah, do you have one, or is it me?
Oh, you can just...
Okay, so I was reading something which I found interesting. I think it relates a little bit to the sugar intake and stuff. The pH level of the blood. Can you talk about that? Because I've heard that before, and kind of like something that causes cancer, the pH level. But I think it's also a very abstract principle for many people. You know, how can you regulate something? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. And before we continue, I want to add something to what I just said about the tattoos. I don't want to be I don't want to frighten anybody who has a tattoo. It's quite common nowadays, and I definitely don't say that if you have a tattoo you get cancer. That's not what I'm saying. I just mentioned that is another source, and the body tolerates a certain amount of inflammatory stimuli or toxins, and it's like something you have on your bank account. It's a certain amount of money that you have, and then you can lift off, but you cannot lift off forever. So if you add cigarette smoke and pollutants that you cannot avoid, and chemicals from ointments and creams and deodorants, and the tattoo, and other toxins like alcohol or drugs, then you will reach the level where your body cannot handle the amount of toxins. That's my message. You can afford a little bit of that. And if you smoke a cigarette, you will not get cancer from smoking a cigarette. But if you smoke a cigarette all the time and you do this and you do this and you do that, then you accumulate toxicity, and that will definitely contribute to lower health and to a higher risk of cancer. So pH level, what's that? Well, it's a chemical term we maybe remember from school time. It has to do with the concentration of hydrogen or protons in a liquid. That's what the chemist calls the pH level. Let's start from there. And hydrogen is a very common atom. It's the most universal and most common atom in the entire universe, and then also in our body. It's the most common atom in our body. So we have it bound in all the organic molecules, where hydrogen is a very common component of our body molecules. But we also have hydrogen in a free form called ionized hydrogen. Chemical symbol is H+. Another word for that is it's a proton. It's a charged particle called a proton, also called hydrogen, and it's the most common element in the human body. And the concentration of that H+ atom is measured with a scale, and that scale is called pH. So it's a logarithmic number of the concentration of protons in a liquid. And a liquid can have two different qualities. It can either be an acid, or it can be something that we call alkaline. An acid, take a lemon, take vinegar, very common acids, are liquids with a lot of free protons. That's why they have a sour taste. That's why the taste buds on my tongue give me a sour sensation when I get lemon juice in my mouth, because the hydrogen plus atoms tell my taste buds that this is a sour experience. And the opposite would be an alkaline liquid. Vegetables are slightly alkaline, cucumbers, for instance, and they have a different taste. They not so clear, described as sour. Everybody understands what sour is. Alkaline taste is more a little bit astringent, a little bit slimy from the consistency. It's a little bit like soap, tiny little bit. So that would be an alkaline experience in my mouth. And what does the chemist say about alkalinity? Well, it's the lack of protons. It's a liquid where proton atoms are not very concentrated. And another type of a chemical charged particle is more dominant, and that is called the OH minus molecule. So OH minus is alkalinity, H plus is acidity. The point of neutrality is called pH 7.
Yeah.
So a liquid that has pH 7 is perfectly in balance between H plus and OH minus. That's what we call a neutral. This water should be pH 7. pH with low number is acidity. pH with high number is alkalinity. And the human body wants to be in balance. It does not want to be alkaline. It does not want to be acidic. It wants to be in balance. All the stresses of my life, inclusive inflammation and inclusive the most common types of toxins, make my body acidic. It's just a fact. If I sleep too little, if I stress too much, if I eat sugar, if I eat white bread with a sweet spread on it, if I eat pomfret and chips and sweet stuff, my metabolic system turns into acidity. The biochemistry behind that is too complicated for this podcast, but if you put sugar into your mouth, you make your body more acidic. Interestingly enough, if you put a sour lemon into your mouth, our body turns lemon acid into an alkaline substance. You can read about that in my book. So not everything that tastes sour in my mouth makes my body acidic or sour. But things that my body turn into acidity is what we call acid waste products or acid ash products. And the most common acid ash products, it's a technical term, chemical term, is sugar, red meat, white flour products. That is the dominant part of Western world diet. We eat too much meat, and we eat too much potatoes, and we eat too much white bread, and we put too much sugar in the ketchup and the mustard and everything, and the ready canned food is full of sugar. Why do we have so much sugar in our industrially preformed food? Because the companies sell more. The more sugar they put into the food, the more we buy it, because we love sugar.
Interesting.
Yeah. So sugar makes us acidic. Alcohol makes us acidic. Animal food makes us a little bit acidic. What is the opposite? What makes us alkaline? Plant-based food, salad, vegetables. That's where we get alkalinity from, because the plant world is more full of alkaline molecules.
And that leads me to one of the other fields. I don't know how much into nutrition you are, but again, you have a principle called nutritional abundance. So what are your thoughts on diet? Do you have some sort of preferred way of eating?
Yes. Yeah. Again, I give you the summarized version because I just have to say that every of your question would deserve a 2 hours lecture.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the summary version is an approach to food. Why do we need food? Because we keep our body alive, we need energy, and we need repair particles for our body. So we need energy, but we also need elements, chemical elements. Around about 80 different chemical elements is what we need to keep our body alive. And we need the energy that is stored in the chemical bounds between the atoms that our body splits up and takes the energy and creates the body energy that we live from. So an abundance of food is that we get a hold of all these 80 food items. One problem with unhealthy food is it doesn't give us enough sulfur, phosphorus, vitamins, minerals, selenium, zinc, iron, copper, etc., iodine, and the right amount of proteins that are made out of amino acids. So cheap food, junk food, unhealthy food does not give us the variety of chemical elements and molecules that our body needs. Number 2, bad food, we spoke about that, changes the pH value to acidity. And why is acidity not good? Because acidity triggers inflammation. And inflammation reduces the immune system's capacity to fight cancer. So now we already got a few examples how these factors interact with each other. So an abundance of food aims at the quality of the variety of all the molecules that we need, and the next aspect of healthy food is, of course, quality.
Yeah, exactly.
Food that is not poisoned, food that is produced from healthy living systems, from healthy plants, and if you eat animal products, from healthy animals that have a worthy life and that grow up without pesticides and without antibiotics, etc. So food has definitely also a quality aspect. It has a quantity aspect. Cheap food does not contain the quantities, but it also comes with pesticides and contaminants and things that are not good to the body. That's the quality aspect. And then the next aspect in the food chapter is, does it create inflammation or not? And healthy food is anti-inflammatory. 100 years ago, our food was much more anti-inflammatory than nowadays because of many, many factors. It contained more omega-3 fatty acids, more trace elements. And because of modern agriculture, we have exploited the resources of our fields in terms of selenium and zinc and other minerals. We throw artificial fertilizers on the fields, but we disrupt and we destroy the natural balance of minerals in the soil, and that's why the food products that we harvest are not good enough to give us all the chemicals we need. 2 examples, very, very important for cancer medicine: vitamin D and omega-3 fatty acids, maybe the 2 most important deficient molecules that average people lack in their diet. Especially in the dark part of the year, we all need some extra vitamin D, especially in the northern countries. And we all need, or most people need, more omega-3 fatty acids, a very healthy, polyunsaturated fatty acid that is that you find in marine products like fish and krill and algae, but very, very little in food that is grown on the earth, because these organisms do not produce much omega-3 fatty acids. There are 2 exceptions. That's linseed. Linseed oil is a good source for omega-3 fatty acids, and primrose. But primrose is very expensive. Almost nobody buys primrose oil because it's used in cosmetics, and it's an anti-inflammatory oil for skin, for instance. It's a remedy for inflammatory diseases. So the most easiest way to get omega-3 fatty acids from plant-based products is linseed, but the even more powerful version of it in a more active form of omega-3 fatty acids is what you find in marine products, in krill, in small fish, and herring, or in health supplements that you can buy in a health food store. And these 2 items are act anti-inflammatorily. Believe it or not, vitamin D and omega-3 fatty acids help us to keep inflammation down. And that is a very, very common deficiency in everybody's diet, that these 2 components are missing.
If you had to structure the perfect diet for the youth today, because you just mentioned yourself that so much of the food now is, even though you think you might get it from a good source, even the soil has been, deprived of all of its minerals. So, I mean, it's difficult to find the nutrition you need. Like, what would the perfect, if you just had to break it down in certain foods and in terms of like plant-based and meat and these kind of things, from a cancer perspective, how you structure it?
Yeah, well, there is a food brochure. The shortest version to give you an answer that is professional is my food brochure on our website that people can order and download. It's a 18 page version. This is a lecture in itself here. And I can give you a few keywords now. Eat more fresh food. Go to the food store and eat more in the fresh department. Salad, colorful vegetables, peppers, tomatoes, red beets, carrots, cabbage. Cabbage is extremely healthy. Also, fermented cabbage, so-called sauerkraut, very famous in Germany, is super healthy. It's healthy because of cabbage and the sulfurous components in cabbage, which is an anti-cancer molecule in itself. Cruciferous vegetables, in other words, cabbage, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, all the members of the cruciferous family contain anti-cancer molecules called sulforaphane and indole-3-carabinol. Other fancy names can be found in the literature. So components that have anti-cancer properties that reduce the production of cancer cells. Proven, scientifically proven. Broccoli sprouts contain the highest amount of sulforaphane, and sulforaphane is a very, very well described and understood anti-cancer component. So back to healthy diet for everybody, and also for young adults, as you said. Fresh salads, smoothies. If you need more energy, put the veggies and the fruits into a juicer or make your own smoothies. Add a little bit of coconut oil, add a little bit of linseed oil to get omega-3 fatty acids. Eat seeds and grains, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, nuts, very healthy. And you get omega-3 fatty acids and vitamin E in nuts, very important. Selenium, para nuts contain selenium. Eat a para nut a day to make sure you get enough selenium. Most soils in Denmark, in Germany, in Central Europe contain too little selenium. So we have an epidemic of selenium deficiency. Almost everybody has a little to little selenium. You can measure that and find out if you have enough. And if not, it's very easy to supplement. Health supplements are a good choice. I have started with it more than 10 years ago, and I believe that contributes to my good health. Thanks God, I can say that I'm a healthy 59-year-old guy, and part of my philosophy is that I make sure I get enough trace elements and the micronutrients that keep my inflammation under control. So I take a few supplements every morning to contribute to my health.
What about animal-derived products? Both stuff that comes from animals like milk and egg, but also animals themselves. There's different meat. There's white meat, there's fish, there's red meat.
Yeah. Big question. Yeah. Big question. Is vegetarian lifestyle better than animal products in moderation? Very, very difficult question to answer.
Has the answer. Let's be honest.
For sure, I can say that in average, Europeans and even more American people eat too much animal products. So we should reduce the intake, the consumption of animal products, mostly red meat, in average to a lower level. We have consumed too much meat in general. Animal food is not only bad. Yeah, it gives us iron, for instance. It gives us proteins. And there is an ethical and a more philosophical and sometimes even a religious aspect of it. I respect vegetarians. I have met people who are Buddhists or Jains from India who have to stay away from animal products because of religious reasons. And I respect that, but I advise them to be very careful with protein intake and eat more legumes and protein-rich food from grains and sprouts and seeds, because leaves and berries do not contain so much proteins. So we need proteins. We need trace elements like iodine. Where do we find iodine? In marine products, in fish and shells and shrimps and seafood, or in sea grass, which is not a part of our traditional food. That's very common in Japan and in Southeast Asia, but we don't eat so much seagrass, don't we? But seagrass would be very healthy and give us iodine and also proteins. So if you like, eat seagrass. It's about the right quantity. I feel a little stressed by the question because it's so big, it's so complex. Yeah, read at least 20-page brochure. Otherwise, my answer is always incomplete. Everything needs to be in balance. We need to eat the food that gives our body all the building blocks that we need. We need to eat the right amount of protein. Your question is what a nutritionist discusses with a patient
so
in 2 or 3 sessions, an hour each, to give a professional answer. So in average, let's make it simple. In average, eat less red meat. Eat more fish and poultry. If you eat red meat, make sure it comes from a healthy animal. Lamb, deer, rhine, cattle, grass-fed cattle from an organic farm. Avoid pork, avoid cheap meat that comes from industrial production, because that's just bad food. And it's also ethically very, very unsatisfactory. So I already said eat fresh and eat a variety of legumes and vegetables. Go for the color. Colorful vegetables are especially healthy. Everything that is colorful, red or purple, contains healthy pigments. Tomatoes, red beets, etc. Onions, super healthy. Variety and quality.
Let's say I was diagnosed with cancer and I became a patient of yours. What would such a process look like?
Well, thank you for that question. Very practical. You find us and you go to our website and find our email address and you send us an email. And then my secretary Tanya takes over and contacts you and sends you a questionnaire and asks you to send us as much of your medical documentation as you can get hold of. You ask your doctor, your nurse, to give you copies of your last CT scan, if you have any, or doctor's report, pathology report, blood values, and you send a whole chunk to Tanya by email and fill out the questionnaire. The questionnaire is about how are you, what symptoms do you suffer from, do you have pain, can you manage your day-to-day situation, or do you need a caretaker, etc. So performance status, that we get an idea on how you are and what you can do if we can take care of you, because Arcadia Clinic is not a big hospital with day and night care for bedridden patients, but Arcadia Clinic is a treatment clinic for patients who can live like hotel guests in a beautiful guest room, and we have laundry service and room service and restaurant and full board meals, but it's more like in a hotel, not like in a hospital for bedridden patients. We cannot take care of bedridden patients. So, and then I look through your documents, your questionnaire. And by the way, we are 3 medical doctors. I have 2 colleagues here that help me to do the work. So one of us will look through the documents, and then we get back to you very fast, normally within 2 or 3 days, with an offer. We invite you to have a video consultation with us, and where we get to know each other. It's 20 minutes. It's for free, and we look at each other, and I describe what we could do, and to get to know each other, and that results in a written proposal that we send to the patient, and then you can decide whether you want to accept the proposal or not. In average, patients with cancer, and patients knock at our door most of the time not as the first clinic, but more likely when they have difficulties and when their oncologist tells them it doesn't look that good. And that's our daily work, to take care of patients who have already been in treatments for a while. So the average investment in time and money to come to our clinic is 3 weeks. Some patients can afford to come for 2 weeks, and that's good. 1 week is in most cases not long enough to give us a chance to help the patient. 2 weeks is good, 3 weeks is better. So patient gets a written proposal with a list of all the therapies that we do here, and can then make a choice and say, well, I come, and then we take over the planning. From Denmark, most patients come by car, some come by train, some come by airplane, and we pick them up in Frankfurt Airport. From other countries, we have patients here from all over the world. We counted through the number of countries. We had more than 50 different countries here in the last year. So, and then we start on day 1 with a long list of laboratory tests. We have a laboratory that is able to detect circulating tumor cells and do a chemosensitivity analysis based on circulating tumor cells. What is that? That's a cutting-edge laboratory technique to test what drugs are most effective for this individual. So we take out blood. The laboratory finds circulating cancer cells in this blood tube and checks, around 16 drugs that we choose out from a long list. The 16 drugs that are most likely to be helpful and to kill the cancer cells. And the laboratory test that comes back after 6 days tells us that this drug is the best and next best is this, but this drug didn't work at all. So instead of making the experiment in the patient, we do the experiment at the laboratory and use the test result to find the best drugs for this individual patient. And then we treat according to patient's needs, of course. But let me say, it's something more common. It's colon cancer with a metastasis in the liver. Or it's colon cancer reoccurrent after successful surgery, and now there are metastases somewhere in lymph nodes or the lungs or the liver. This is a very common situation for us. Or it's breast cancer with metastases that has come back after successful surgery. This is maybe one of the most common types of patients that call us. And then we write a therapy plan, and we use less toxic drugs or non-toxic drugs. And that, again, is now, we deserve a longer discussion. How do we do that? A treatment plan is made by one of the doctors that includes a variety of injectable anti-cancer drugs. And what makes us special is that we have a compound pharmacy that produces injectable natural anti-cancer drugs with almost no toxicity, such as high-dosage vitamin C, turmeric extract, Chinese wormwood extract, green tea extract, cannabidiol for injection from cannabis, the non-psychotropic part of cannabis called CBD. Altogether, more than 10 botanicals, DCA, dichloroacetate, sugar oil from ginger, etc. A long list. Mistletoe, of course.
But how do you incorporate these natural remedies into the treatment process? I assume there's also that part of it, and not just the regular therapeutic.
Yeah, so based on experience and based on laboratory test result. If the disease has an inflammatory component, which is most of the case, which is a fact in most of the cases, then we use turmeric because curcumin is a very powerful anti-inflammatory molecule. Or we use resveratrol from grape extract. So it's your question: how do we incorporate these drugs? Based on experience, based on the literature, but also based on the individual test results.
I actually meant not the natural remedies in terms of the drugs, but these core principles, these vital fields. Do you include those in the treatment process as well with your patients?
Oh yes, that is the background overall. So it's inflammation control with healthy food, anti-inflammatory plant extracts in capsule form, anti-inflammatory infusions, PEMF therapy, pulsed electromagnetic frequency therapy with special magnetic devices, inhalation with hydrogen. We could talk an hour about hydrogen, super exciting. Inhalation of H2 hydrogen in gas form is a new way to treat chronic inflammation. The literature of the last years has revealed that it's a very powerful and totally non-toxic treatment, and it's even cheap. You need a hydrogen generator, and you inhale H2 3/4 of an hour a day, and that reduces your inflammatory overheated pathways, and it gives even power to the mitochondria. And more. So it's so many details that we can do. Which believe me, the therapy plan is quite a complex program with oxygen inhalation, hydrogen inhalation, massage therapy. We didn't even touch the mental part. Yeah. Please give me at least 10 minutes to speak a little bit about emotions and the mental part, because that's extremely important too. So we build up. We use biohacking technologies. Yeah. PEMF and hydrogen inhalation is cutting edge biohacking, the new term, how we hack into the biology of our cells and make them more powerful. And the more we repair the mitochondrial damage, the mitochondria are the small power plants inside our cells. This is my cell model. So a cell membrane and the nucleus of the cell where the genes are. And these bean-like structures, and here's one with an open surface, are called mitochondria. And some cells have up to many hundred of these mitochondria, and that's where the cell produces the biochemical energy in form of ATP. We could not live 10 seconds without ATP. So as long as we live, our mitochondria produce ATP. Somebody calculated out how much ATP we produce. It equals the weight of my body, of our body. So my body has produced 80 kilograms of ATP today. What have I done with 80 kilograms of ATP? I have kept my life going. I produce it and I break it down. I produce it and I break it down. So biohacking is very much about mitochondrial empowerment. Biohacking systems like magnetic frequencies and inhalation of H2 or cold plunge. If you are a fan of Wim Hof and cold plunge, you can do cold plunge or cold shower to activate your mitochondria. It's also a biohacking device. Or breath work. You can do breathing exercises. The Wim Hof breathing technique or other breathing techniques that come with intensified breathing for like 20 or 30 minutes empowers the mitochondrial function. And what has that to do with cancer? The answer is a lot. If we can stimulate the vitality of mitochondria, we can make cancer cells dormant. We can make cancer cells, we can turn them into an almost healthy form of cellular life. That's published in magazines like Nature and Science. So there is a prophecy for the future that we might be able to cure cancer once in the future if we learn even more how to reactivate the mitochondria, because cancer is a disease with damage in the mitochondria. That's the mitochondrial part of my 12-fold vital field. And so everything we know that empowers the energy production in our mitochondria will help us to get cancer under control, at least better than if we would not do it. So how do we incorporate the drugs? We have these drugs in oral forms, like we have enzymes to reduce inflammation and improve digestion. We have turmeric in capsule form, and it's a catalog of around 50 different supplements that we compose based on the patient's needs and the laboratory findings. And some of the drugs are available in an injectable form. That's what we give in IVs and inject in intravenous infusions. And we do that in combination with heat therapy, so-called hyperthermia, where we heat up the cancerous the cancerous tissues or the organ that is affected with cancer with harmless radio waves. No damage is done with radio waves, but the tumor becomes warmer. And when the tumor is warmer or overheated, it's weaker to resist the drugs. And because of the vessel widening that comes with hyperthermia, we get more of the drugs into the overheated part of the disease. So we create a very complex therapy program that is described in the book, where we add heat, magnetism, oxygen, hydrogen, food supplements, natural anti-cancer drugs, and now, last not least, the power of our mind. That was what we have not addressed yet in our podcast. Now, how important is that? Well, as important as everything we have mentioned so far. True healing comes from within. Healing is what happens in between the therapies. And healing is not possible if someone is in a fearful state of mind or in a stressful state of mind. Healing is just not possible. The body needs to be in a relaxed parasympathetic mode. Parasympathetic means relaxation. The relaxation symptom, medical doctors or biologists call that the parasympathetic nervous system. It's the brother of the sympathetic nervous system, that is the flight and fight and survival mode. And that's another pitfall of modern man in the beautiful world we have created with all the industrialism and the communication that we have now, which is enormous and sometimes fascinating, but it also stresses us. And all the stress that comes from the cell phones and from the emails and from the buzz from all sides changes the balance between relaxation and activation into sympathetic stress mode. And stress keeps on killing us. It's the number one reason for too early death. If you follow an expert publication from the World Health Organization from many, many years ago. Stress is the number one reason for too early death in modern societies, because stress switches off our self-healing capacity and creates inflammation and takes away our sleep. And sleep is a very precious time for our body to regenerate. Sleep comes with alkalinity. And now you see again how the things are connected. Yeah, the day activity makes us more acidic, and we need 7 or 8 hours night sleep to produce more alkaline products in our liver and our duodenum in the small intestines to compensate the acidity alkalinity balance. And also our nervous system, which is sympathetic, parasympathetic, should be in balance. But we stress so much, we sleep too little, and we answer too many phone calls and answer all the hundreds of mails that we get every day. And that switches on the sympathetic nervous system over and over again. And that does not allow the body to heal. Self-healing is dependent on parasympathetic nervous activation. And that is, again, where something where breathing exercises, meditation, yoga, mindfulness exercises play a major role. So we teach in the morning, we give the infusions with the drugs and the hyperthermia and the oxygen and the massage and the PEMF treatments, pulsed electromagnetic frequency, abbreviation PEMF. And in the afternoon, we have the meetings with the cancer coach. We have a cancer coach on board, Mona Meyer, my dear colleague, who sits in the room here next door. She meets patients in the afternoon in both group sessions, but also in individual sessions, and teaches our patients how to get out of stress with body exercises, but also with mental training and mental exercises. And that is as important as the healthy food, at least.
Interesting.
It's inner toxicity. Unhealthy thoughts are like toxic products that the brain sends down to the body. And we know that the brain is connected to our immune system. And the scientific description of that is called psychoneuroimmunology. Psychoneuroimmunology. It's an academic discipline with textbooks and hundreds, if not probably thousands of publications already that describe the connection between the brain and the immune system. The connection is very, very strong. If this podcast makes you happy, you have a stronger immune system than an hour ago. And if this podcast would stress you and worry you, your immune system would go down. That's how important the mind-body connection is.
For sure. It
really stresses what we do as well. We got to do stuff that makes us happy. You know, maybe that's also a huge, would you say that's the number one factor for maybe why this happens so much? Maybe people don't do what they love. They don't do what they find interesting and stuff like that. Could you say that's maybe the biggest factor?
Yes, I'm tempted to say yes, but then I'm a holistic person again and say it's not only that, it's that in combination with other things. So the temptation is to look for the single one reason. The answer is always it's more complex than what you think. And go through your life and find out, is it the junk food or is it the stress? We all know people who have lived a very intensive life, and maybe they have smoked a few cigarettes and not always eaten the most healthy diet, but they grow old and they are happy. And then we have teetotalers who never touched a glass of beer and live from vegan food only, and they attract cancer at the age of 30. These are real examples. Why is that the case?
It's complex.
The answer is always an individual one. there is no rule for everybody. And what I want to do with the book and also with this presentation today is to tap all these factors and then to leave it up to you and the listeners to find out, where are my weak spots? Is it stress in my life, or is it junk food, or is it toxicity from the sprays of my farmer next door that I inhale every day? Or was it just a virus infection together maybe with some stress? Here I am again with combination of factors. But if a girl gets a virus infection from sexual intercourse at the age of 13, when her vaginal, or 14, when her vaginal microbiome is not stable and powerful, and catches a virus and develops 15 years later cervical cancer, then I have to say that this virus infection is probably the number one cause for the cervical cancer at the age of 30.
Sounds intense, yeah.
So sometimes it's a virus, sometimes it's chronic stress. And simple answers are and generalizing answers are always wrong. There is no one answer for 500 types of cancer, but now at least we have a map where we can look at it. Now I mentioned the factor number 11, which is infection defense. Let's talk a minute about this case that I just took as an example. Infection defense. It's a fact that sexual intercourse comes with the risk of an infection. But if you have a proper infection defense, you can deal with it. Yeah, and the natural way of an infection defense in a female vagina happens around the age of 16, 17, 18, when the terrain of the vagina is characterized by a powerful microbiome, like in the intestines. It's a different kind of microbiome. So it's a combination of healthy lactic acid bacteria. And if that is not there, then infectious particles hit the tissues and cause an infection that can be difficult to get rid of. So infection defense is very important. By the way, I recommend women with genital infections to repair their microbiome by using special pills with lactic acids for this very purpose. They're made by pharmaceutical companies and can be bought in a pharmacy to restore and repair a damaged vaginal microbiome, something that happens even for adult women after an antibiotic treatment. Antibiotics are sometimes life-saving, but they can also destroy the microbiome, not only in the guts, but also in other parts of the body. So you need to repair the microbiome again and to have a good infection defense. Now we have an example for factor 11 on my field map.
For sure.
So lack of infection defense can, after 10 years, cause cancer.
All right, Henning. Thanks a lot for this amazing conversation. I think the danger of being holistic is that you need to invest so much time in each point to make the message clear. So maybe if you're interested, then we can make a part 2 for another time where we go more in depth in the particular components.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. Do the listeners have a chance to give you feedback? Maybe you want to ask your audience what they like to hear more about.
No problem.
Yeah, they can just write. They know that now.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely.
Okay, and then we do a second.
Yeah,
we do a second episode.
Definitely interesting.
But my answer to your statement, yes, it's correct. It's complex, but we have no other choice. Either we understand it, or we just run into the problem.
Totally agree.
So, sorry, it's just to accept that it is complex and that we need to work for a better health. Otherwise, yeah, that's how I started.
Is it really that complex? You know, I mean, of course, it's complex to understand it to the level intellectually as you are doing it. But again, I mean, we know that the soda and these things are not good for us. So at the end of the day, it's complex, but it's also simple. You know, but Great points.
You're right. So I'm looking forward to your feedback and hope that we shed some light on very important life aspects, and that the audience also got something tangible out of the podcast, that we can contribute to a better life and a better health. And there's so much we can do, and we're not dependent on pharmaceuticals only.
Henning, thank you so much.
Yep,
and yeah, you'll hear from us with the part 2 at some times in the future. It's been a true pleasure.
Yeah.
Likewise, thank you, Jacob and Mats.
Sure.
Keep up the good work.
Bye.
Bye, Henning.